Hey there, and welcome to the Digital Transformist. I'm Michael LaVista. I'm thrilled to say I've got Mark Pace with us today. I've known Mark kind of for a long time as we've been working in a class about how to get better at understanding people and improving your sales funnel. And through that, I've learned that Mark is the CEO and founder of the Vital Longevity Institute. And I saw him speak recently at an event we were both at, where he was talking about his offering more in depth. I thought it'd be really interesting for people here on the podcast to hear about. And so I won't try to steal too much of his thunder, but as I understand it, it's sort of a methodology for taking a fresh look at longevity. I think one of the things I took away, Mark, from your talk was that when we all walk around with this idea the life expectancy is some number, and whether it's 82 or something, and women live a little bit longer. And you kind of shed some light on the idea that, well, maybe that's true sort of at large in the population. If you're 75, the likelihood you'll get to 95 is a lot higher than you think, kind of thing. And so you're coming at this both from longevity, but also from a financial, management point of view. So I'd love to hear for people, like, tell us a little bit about what the Vital Longevity Institute is all about, and really maybe how you came to it. Let's start there. Like, what is it, and how did you come to be doing it?
Sure, Mike. For many, many years, I've been this guru in the life insurance space. And for those of you who have ever dealt in that fun topic of life insurance, the sort of the dirty little secret is that most of the life insurance that's been sold over the last 30 or 40 years is actually designed to fail. In other words, run out of gas before someone actually dies. And so I became, and I hate that. I mean, I think when someone buys a life insurance policy, it should be enforced when they die. So I helped write some books and created some, innovative ways of managing these policies so that they actually would succeed. And to do that, you actually have to get an idea of how long people are supposed to live. So I got to know one of the top actuaries in America. Actuaries are those guys that do the in-depth, detailed analysis of probabilities around different things, but in this case, life, life expectancy, death, and things like that. And in so doing, I learned that most of us, myself included, 30 years ago when I first got involved with this, are confused almost intentionally about terminology that you used just now, like life expectancy. And because of those misunderstandings, many people are mismanaging the way they're running their life, they're running their careers, obviously their finances. And that's basically how this started, was on a professional basis, day in and day out. I would see because I had worked hard and paid my dues and paid a lot of money to get access to this proprietary data that often people generally don't see, which is the data that the life insurance industry is using to manufacture their products. And I was shocked and amazed that when I would be having conversations with, wealthy professional business owners, advisors to the high net worth, and I would ask them a very simple question: how long do you think you're going to live? The answers they would typically give me would almost always be 10 to 20 years shorter than I knew was the midpoint of a population, which is really what life expectancy is, of individuals that look like them. So that's
How,
how it
let me ask
started.
this. How did you know? Like, what do you know, or what do you apply to your thinking that tells you that they are 10 to?
Well, I have the actual proprietary data, so I can pull up a chart when someone tells me how old they are, what sex they are, what their health looks like. I can input it and immediately give you the year-by-year cumulative probability of death for a healthy population or an impaired population or whatever it might be, which is the actual definition of life expectancy. It's that year-by-year probability of death. And when people use the term life expectancy, it's when half of the population is dead. And by the way, Mike, that's probably the first misunderstanding that most people have, is they hear the term And before we got AI, if you were to Google life expectancy, for many years, you Google it and it'd say when a person can expect to die. So it's easy to see how that misunderstanding has
Sure.
arisen.
Sure.
And then it goes further. There are different populations that you could judge from. And that was perhaps where the biggest misrepresentation inadvertently occurs. So, give you a quick example. When I first started doing this type of work some 30 years ago, the gentleman that was mentoring me was like this super, expert in the actuarial space. He was like the second president of the American Society of Actuaries. And he said, you probably really don't understand the terms the way you think you understand the terms. So let me give you an example. He said, if you're dealing with and that's what I was doing. I had a 55-year-old couple. They were both in great shape. They were a billionaire family, and they were looking at acquiring $100 million of new life insurance. And I had been employed to give them advice, not to sell them product, just give them advice. And so in my mind, some 30 years ago, I'm thinking people who are 55 are probably supposed to live into their late 70s. That's because, you'd read these articles and it would say, life expectancy in America is now 77.6 or whatever it might be, and the male's supposed to live to be 75 point whatever, and the female's supposed to live to be this, and the average is 76.6 or whatever. And so he goes, that's how they fool you. He said, that is valid. But what you don't realize is that is the at-birth number. So they're making projections for the entire population of America. They're segregating them into male and female, and that is the at-birth number. So he goes, the first thing you need to understand, Mark, is that's an irrelevant number when it comes to how long a person should live.
So if I were to restate that, the key idea here is that when you are just born, you might live to be 82. But if I'm sitting here at 53, that the likelihood of me, I think you showed a chart about the wherever the dividing line of 50% is, that the likelihood I get to 89 is actually a lot larger than I thought it is. Is that
Correct.
kind of idea? So let's
Yeah.
start where you're starting is the key
Yeah.
idea.
Well, it's more than that. It's also the group you're judging. So it's let me sort of give you what I would call the broad terminology that as the general public perhaps would like to know. When you see those articles that are giving you broad population data, they're generally using what is known as at-birth data. All right? And that's okay if we want to say that America is doing, say the U.S. is doing worse than Canada, or Canada is doing better than Britain, or whatever it might be as far as overall health of our society. But if you're an individual, the first thing you want to know is what group you're in and where you start for the judgment. So the next table that is perhaps the most commonly used to create further misunderstanding is the Social Security table. So that one you can go online right now, pull up Social Security website, it'll actually do a calculation. It'll say how old are you male or you're female, and that's about it. But now you're an adult, so you have an age, but we're now comparing you to the entire population of adult males. All right? But what's important to understand is, Mike, yes, you're a part of that population, but you're a more select group than the general population. And so is probably everybody that's ever going to see this broadcast. They probably went to college. They probably have a higher income than the general public. They perhaps run a business. They have access to health care. They take care of themselves. So it was pointed out to me, there's sort of three general big categories of actuarial data. At birth, irrelevant to anybody. Your age attained data, but general population, which is the Social Security data, that's probably the second most one that people hear. 77 right now is the at birth number in America. The adult for the Social Security, you probably hear 80, 85. But as soon as you move into that more select group, typically people who perhaps would be buying life insurance, for
Yeah.
instance,
Right.
right? That number will oftentimes jump another 10 years. So at birth here, general population, age attained here, and these are generalities, and then select demographic group, you almost jump another 10, as long as you're still healthy.
Yeah. It's
And that
incredible.
was the chart you saw.
Yeah. Because the other implication I thought about is, and this drives me crazy thinking about this. I'm, thinking about retirement is, in a way, it implies that maybe if you're interested, you have a lot more valuable working years than you thought too. So why retire at 60 if, do you want to spend 40 years playing golf? I mean, I'm not one of those people. I've got lots of
Mm-hmm.
interesting things to do. And so the idea that we're still valuable and like, huge, like, the accumulation of knowledge and experience and all the things you brought into your work, why stop at a certain age if you've got another 30, 40 years to go? That's kind of one of the ideas I took away. What do you think about that
I think it's fundamental to my personal belief system, because what I learned very early on, did a lot of research around retirement, for instance. I discovered that the first real national retirement system was set up in Germany back around 1890, when Bismarck was the chancellor. And its sole purpose, it's interesting, Mike, its sole purpose was this: the Industrial Revolution had hit both the cities and the farmland. So what was going on was the young, families were having lots of kids, because, a lot of them didn't survive childbirth and the young years. So you need a lot going in, but then you needed a lot of them to just run the farm. But all of a sudden you had tractors and tillers and all these type things, so you didn't need all those kids. So the first thing they did was they started sending the young men into the cities. But the cities were already had all the laborers they needed, and so suddenly we had all these young men unemployed. Now, I don't know about you, but remember during COVID when suddenly we had all this unemployment going on in America, and we suddenly had riots in all these cities? Well, that's what happens when young men are unemployed. So what Bismarck and his team actually did is they already had actuaries. He said, when are the workers dying? And amazingly, the at-birth number back in 1890 for that population was about 40. But the adult life expectancy was already 70, right? So what they did is they put in this system that basically said if you were 70 or beyond, guess what you had to do?
got
Go
retired?
home,
Yeah, go
and
home.
we'll pay you.
Yeah, we'll make room for the next generation. Yeah,
And they made room for the next generation. So that was the whole purpose of it. Now, suddenly the people on the streets rioting were the old men, but they're not nearly as dangerous and they don't burn things down. And that's how it got started. And then after World War I, they moved it back to 65. And then when we did it in 1940, we just grabbed 65. If we had used Bismarck's logic, which was when were the workers dying, by 1940, adult life expectancy in America was already around 77. So we would have made Social Security 77, not 65. But politicians don't play games that way. They've never been able to move them up. It's been very difficult. So yeah, I mean, we should be retiring if we use that logic at 85 right now. So 65 is like this crazy made up number that has no relevance unless you live into it, which most people do, though. See,
Yeah.
that's the other side of the equation.
Well, so let me so talk about what are the most interesting things that people can do with that information. So now that we have this in our heads, that maybe I need to reevaluate, uh, when I might, how long I might still be really active and valuable, and then when I should be making plans for it. Like, what have you seen your clients do that's different, having had this information?
Well, one of the things we did was once we got deep into this topic, we started studying the healthy centenarians, the people who were 100 and over. And the one thing we found that was consistent anywhere in the world, that you find these people who were vital and healthy. It's one thing to make it to 100, but to be, you know, really vital and healthy is every one of them was still aggressively doing what they loved. So the term we came up with is permanent purposeful participation. So that physician in Japan who's 109, I mean, you may have read about that. He still goes in and practices, so, and he's still very good at what he does. Maybe he doesn't have the workload he used to have, but he still does it. That woman in the Andes who delivers water, and that's all she's ever done with her life. She still gets up at 105 and she delivers water. So the bottom line to me is why not stay engaged and active as long as you can? Because this myth that has been set up in our society that, once you cross 55, you're supposed to be declining, that was, I can actually tell you where that came from. When I started in my career, I was the assistant controller. I was very fortunate at a very young age of a very large bank. And we had to turn in reports to the federal government. It was called the Core Labor Statistics Report. And a core laborer was anyone between the age of 25 and 55. So that mythology still exists that's when you're prime, and when you pass 55, you're past your prime. We
Interesting.
now know that as you alluded at the beginning of this segment, when you're in the wisdom business, which most everybody probably that's ever going to watch this is, you don't hit your prime till you're about 55, and you're in it till you're maybe 75 or 85. That's the new neurology, wisdom. So what that tells me is, and most of our clients actually do, they find ways to stay active and engaged much longer. I mean, we've got clients that are even 95 years old and still running successful businesses.
It's so interesting how sometimes a number or an idea can really stick in the consciousness. Because another one I'll throw in there is I feel like when I was growing up, there was an idea that I think has been proven to be laughably false, that you don't learn anything new after 25. I don't know if you remember that. And it just sort of, I feel like it's sort of, it gives people an out to say, I'm not gonna choose to learn anything new after 25,
Mhm.
or I'm not gonna choose to do anything interesting after 55 when I'm past my prime. And all these ideas get stuck in your head as sort of like an excuse you've got, waiting in your back pocket. And I think, the more that, now that we see people getting older and being really kind of still vibrant, and, part of their growing businesses, and, even starting, I had a friend of a client start a business at 75 recently that's like their, I think, fourth or fifth, the go around. And, the idea that it's, honestly, like, mindset is so powerful that, the idea that it's possible is half the battle. The idea that I actually could go do this. And now I'm just rethinking everything. Part of what, even just since I saw you do your talk, and I've heard you do this idea a number of times over the years, but it's really like really extended what I think is possible for me. And I didn't even think that was possible. And so I've been guilty in my life of moving my own goalposts, because it's like, oh,
Mhm.
this is still kind of fun. Like, why why would I change this? And I think that's one of the messages I think is really exciting about all this, because I think there's, I mean, obviously, because it is a number about death. There's a fatalistic piece of it that says, well, like, you couldn't or shouldn't even think beyond this number. And now when you open up those possibilities, you've got all these different kind of paths you can go to. I think that's the most interesting part for me.
Yeah, and it is, and it's interesting. Well, let me back up a little bit. The history. because the history is interesting. So I'm doing professionally this analysis around life insurance. I'm seeing that most of the people I'm working with, either from the client standpoint or the professional advisor to the high net worth client, have this misunderstanding about how long they're supposed to live. So I created a series of talks. The one you saw is much further down the line. But initially, it was just the shock and awe of the fact that you're probably going to live a lot longer than you think. And my goal was to get people to begin to change their beliefs and behaviors around that premise, as you've alluded to. And it did it a little bit, but it wasn't quite as successful as I wanted it to be. And so not just me, a team. I sold one of my other businesses, invested several millions of dollars into research and analysis about what do we need to do to actually get people to make these huge adjustments to belief and behavior that is candidly going against the grain, the societal grain. And the first thing we learned was that societal grain, if you will, that belief system that you're talking about, that you're bumping into, is far more powerful than we thought. And yeah, I mean, and so I then invested in an online program, hoping to scale quickly. And again, was not getting the results we wanted. Perhaps it would be different today using AI, but I'm not quite where we're there yet. But the point was, I ended up with a coaching program reluctantly and hiring and training coaches. And there we were getting the results using these belief behavior modification techniques to teach them how to create the mindset that the healthy centenarians has had. And what we found was and many of our initial clients were financial advisors, because that was my background, as well as their clients who were the high net worth business owners. And there was a core group, I can think back to about 6 of them right now, who had already signed an agreement to let the next generation take over their business, or in other words, they were already committed to stepping away and couldn't get out of it. And not all of them, but most of those folks, once they stepped off that merry-go-round, couldn't find a way back.
Yeah.
And it's sad. I mean, so we didn't always have victories. And many of them ended up with health issues that arose normal, was in fact 100% of them, which is obviously it's only 6, but 100% of them ended up with some major health issue within 2 years.
Interesting.
And I contend that if you're built to engage with the world and make a difference, that you should find a way to consistently do that. Now, it doesn't have to be full-time gainful, employment, but there's nothing wrong with that either,
Right.
So
Well, it's
we,
it's interesting. Where you were touching on was a question I was going to ask you, because I keep thinking about where AI can make a positive impact in people's lives, and I think there's a possibility that as people get really good at training and using their AI as a companion, as a sort of
mm,
a their bionic arm, so to speak, um, it's possible that you could stay more active another 10 years because maybe you've got a little bit of cognitive decline or your memory is as good as it used to be, but your AI buddy you've been working with for maybe 10 years is totally loaded up on how you think and what you know, and that could extend your kind of your usefulness in that endeavor longer. But also maybe it sounds like can improve your health. Maybe that keeps people that purposeful your 3 Ps keeps you more involved longer, just because now you've got a little bit more firepower at your disposal. What do you think of that as an idea?
yeah, I think it's an interesting topic, because I play around with this whole thing of how the mind continually evolves. And that's the one thing we're seeing, is that it is a continuous evolution as long as there is challenge. As what we're finding, and we work with some of the top neurologists in the country, and some of the latest data, they use a term for us laymen, Mike, called the seeking system. I've got this long technical name I could dig out and give it to you, but it's that part of the brain that is actually adjusting everything about our our body at any given moment. It's paying attention to the rational brain as it plans and forecast what you're going to be doing for the day or next week or whatever it might be, but it's also paying attention to the fact that the temperature in the room might be a little cool. And I mean, so it's constantly monitoring and making hormonal adjustments automatically based on that input. And what they're finding, and this is the big danger, that if we're not careful and listening to some, because I'm always listening to audio books and stuff, the study that MIT just did on AI and its impact on the brain, is that as soon as you diminish the need for seeking and striving, it's like you use it, lose it actually takes place. And if we don't keep ourselves, actively engaged in all of these what have historically been human challenge train, with our brain, we may lose them. And we're actually seeing that. I think that's actually what happens to all those 6 illnesses that took place. I think what actually happened was it wasn't a conscious thought, but at the subconscious level, that seeking system began to shut down.
That's
And
interesting.
because it began to shut down, their health secretions, the things that were keeping them active and vital, began to decline, and that aggregated over time. That's just a personal opinion, although I'm beginning to see that type of data show up. So I think that's going to be our big challenge. Yes, it's going to be like any new technology. It can
Yeah.
be a two-edged
Well, it's
sword.
funny because I've been thinking a lot about this too, and I think the current main use cases for AI, I think, do take away that seeking behavior. And the disappointing thing is that we're trying to find ways to do the same things we've always done, just a little easier. And I think that makes us lazy and complacent. I think the opportunity, the promise for AI could be, let's go seek something more interesting and difficult and deeper that maybe we couldn't have done before on our own. And that's where in a way we're sort of learning how to do it. So I think you're right. Without that, we get these sort of apocryphal. I think I was reading this morning, Amazon's going to lay off 14,000 people this week.
Mhm.
While they're going to say it's because of AI, I think it's kind of a little bit of a smokescreen. That's just me making that up. But I think the idea is, like, if we're just doing if we're automating the same old things, and that's not interesting, and people will get bored, get complacent. They will kind of withdraw in that seeking behavior. But so maybe the frontier is going to be, can we find a new, better way to use it? That's my hope and desire.
Yeah, me too. Because I've watched even in my own career over time. There was a time when I was this, I had a master's in tax and I could do, estate tax planning work, and I would use that as my methodology of, getting to a large life insurance sale before I became the guru around, the longevity stuff. I can't do I could relearn it, but
Yeah.
it's not there like it used to be, you
Right,
know,
sure. Yeah.
because there hadn't been a need for it.
Yeah.
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 And I can easily see that.
Well, so Mark, maybe to wrap up here, this has been great. Such good information. I hope people got something out of it. If people want to find you online and learn more and talk more about longevity, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, for a unique group like the group I'm sure you're talking to, I do something that's sort of rare among folks. I give them my cell phone number. So if you're really interested in this, here's first thing you can do is just call me, and that number is 601-946-1057, 601-946-1057, or text me and tell me, you're about to call. That way like most all of you get a lot of calls. The other thing is you can go to our website. And the easy way to find the website is it's easy to remember. Vital, VITAL, life, LIFE, long.com. Or if you get that confused and you put in Vital Long Life, guess what? We've got them directed, so they'll still go. So Vital Life Long or vitallonglife.com. can get you to our website. And I'd love to talk to any of your audience, Mike. Those are the people we're after. Our goal, to make it simple, is we're looking for difference makers who want to make a bigger difference and do it larger and longer than they ever thought possible. And we've developed tools that actually do that. And I could tell you success story after success story after success story. So thank
Well,
you.
if you want to hear him, call Mark. I do hope your phone blows up as a result of this. But it's been a real pleasure. Lots of great ideas and things to think about here. Would love to have you on again sometime as you get some updates on those actuarial tables.
Sure, will do.